So if we think of person-centered care as an overarching philosophy and the way that we view the lived experience of dementia, what comes beyond that? So how do we actually put that into practice? And at Alzheimer's WA, we've adopted a couple of models that have helped us. Over the last 15 years, really, we've been on this culture change journey. And these models have helped us to take that philosophical approach to the lived experience of dementia and actually put it into practice in the care environments that we create and the way that we do our services. So I'll just explain a little bit about the two models that are our predominant models in doing that. The first one's called Eden Alternative. And the Eden Alternative was a model that came out of the United States probably about 15 years ago now. And the model seeks to develop a culture change program within an organization. A lot of the time what we do is we spend a lot of time training staff and the direct care staff, and we send them off on courses, and then we expect them to come back and do things differently. But they're often coming back to try and do those things differently in the same model, same care environment, same philosophy, same culture of organisation. And so they get really frustrated because they've learned that it can be better, but they're not able to actually put it into practice. So what the Eden Alternative does is it's really helping organisations to understand that if we want to change practice at the coalface, then as an organisation we have to change our own culture, our own philosophy, and the way that we do things. Within the Eden Alternative is a set of principles, and these 10 principles are there as a guide, really. They're a guide to change. They're a guide to how to make things different. And the first part of the Eden Alternative change is really around understanding how our aged care services can negatively impact people. And we don't like to think that we're doing that because we like to think that we're here for the people to do the best for them. I think historically we've tended to do that in aged care by being quite paternalistic and actually doing everything for the person. And every time we do something for the person, it takes away the opportunity for that person to retain their ability and their autonomy, and also to actually not only care for themselves, but maybe care for others as well. And again, that's an intrinsic part of us as human beings. Throughout time and throughout all of our lives, we find ways to actually care for ourselves and for others. And that's an important part of who we are as human beings. So when you move into an aged care environment, often that all gets taken away. So the first principle of Eden is really around recognizing that there are 3 key areas that people end up suffering from when they move into an aged care environment or they receive aged care services. And the first one of those is boredom. And that's not surprising because suddenly your life becomes very structured and it becomes very reliant on everybody else around you. And in that structure, and it can be institutionalization as well, there is no spontaneity. And boredom, I think historically, again, in our medical paradigm, we've tried to get rid of boredom by care planning it out. And so we have activities and we have this monthly activity program, or we have a set of things that people will do. And that's fine. That's entertainment and usually, and it's fine. But eventually you become bored of that as well. And so really the antidote to boredom is actually variety and spontaneity. And if you think of your life and how much variety and spontaneity you have in it, then you'll understand that that's what's stopping you from getting bored. And I think the other thing is when you're feeling bored is that we can get up and do something. We can get up and go and do something that actually relieves that boredom for us. Whereas for somebody with dementia, that opportunity is often not there anymore. And so they're much more reliant on the environment and the people around them to tackle the boredom. So boredom is a really critical issue. And it's been shown in research that boredom sustained and over a long period of time will kill a person because they just give up on life because it becomes so boring. The second, what we call plague of elderhood. So Eden talks about these 3 plagues. So boredom's the first one. The second one is loneliness. And there's been a lot of research in recent times around loneliness and its physical health impacts. And it's really quite dramatic. And I think we're only just waking up to the fact that boredom and loneliness together are major impactors on psychological and physical health of older people. So again, with loneliness, this isn't about having people around you. And most people think loneliness is about having people around you, and it's not. It's about having connection with the people around you. So loneliness is tackled by companionship, and companionship only comes about from relationship. So it's really important for us, both in our care environments and in our work with people with dementia, that we base that on an authentic relationship approach. And by that, I mean that it's not just I'm the support worker and you're the person with dementia. It's actually an authentic relationship between two people who are spending time together. And we've traditionally shied away from that in aged care. And I think in doing that, we've done a great disservice to the elders that we support. The third plague is what we call helplessness. And again, this comes back to, if you get everything taken away from you, then suddenly you get into a real state and feeling of helplessness. And again, helplessness is really about having the opportunity to challenge that by having the opportunity to care for yourself or care for somebody else or something else. You know, many of us will have a garden, for example. Now, why do we have a garden? That's because we have an intrinsic need to nurture and nourish. It's part of our human spirit. And so, you know, for some of us, we'll invest that in a garden or an animal. So, you know, many people have pets, they have dogs, they have cats, and they have a companionship at a deeper level with that animal than would be expected in any rational way when you think this is just an animal that's in my house. So when we look at things like the Pater Pet schemes in residential care homes, for example, that doesn't tackle helplessness, because that's just about bringing an animal in and having 5 minutes to pat the animal and getting some joy out of that. Don't get me wrong, there's often joy in that, but it doesn't tackle helplessness. Having an animal to care for and that you're responsible for caring for, that tackles helplessness. So how can we, I guess, look at the habitats that we create in our households? So we have to have 3 households, and they're very much built and run and developed on the Eden principles. And so what we do is we create a human habitat within the households. So if we go back to 16, 17, 18 years ago, the households that we had were day centres. And the day centres were really about somebody coming on the bus, getting dropped off. They would get their morning tea served to them. They would sit there and be entertained for an hour or two, often with meaningless games or crosswords or quizzes or whatever it would be. They would have their lunch, they'd have a bit more meaningless entertainment in the afternoon, and then they'd get on the bus and go home. And that was what we class as our day centre for people living with dementia. In our culture of change and in our adoption of the Eden alternative, we've turned that a model on its head, and we've turned it into a household where people come, they feel that they have a sense of belonging and familiarity in this household. The staff are there as facilitators, not as doers for. And of course, when we have to step in and do for somebody, we do, because that's our duty of care. But when we can stand back and just give that little bit of support or a little bit of encouragement that's needed for somebody to do for somebody else or for themselves, then that's when we're doing our job to the best of our ability, because we're actually giving them the opportunity. We're giving them the autonomy and choice. We're giving them the sense of meaning and purpose by letting them do it for themselves with just a little bit of support and facilitation from ourselves. So our human habitat creation is the answer to the 3 plagues of loneliness, helplessness, and boredom. And through a total rethinking of the role of staff in doing that, and that's the same in our home care. So if you go into somebody's home, be thinking about what is it that we can do today to tackle those 3 things. What does this person need from me? Do I need to be doing this for the person, or can I just be there to help the person to continue to do it for themselves? And maybe that person can do it for me. And that would give them a real sense of meaning. So when we look at the adoption of Eden Alternative as our model, that's what that's about. And then there are the culture change aspects of the model as well. So this isn't just about what happens in the interface between our support worker staff and the person living with dementia, but it's about who we are as an organisation. And by that, I mean it's things like taking the opportunity to make decisions and placing them as close to the person living with dementia as possible. So in traditional hierarchical thinking, most decisions get made at the top and get flow down and get implemented at the bottom. And there can often be a big disconnect between that decision that gets made and the actual outcome of it at the bottom. And what we try to do is, as much as we can, flatten that out so the decisions are made together. So managers and staff and clients and families come together to make decisions wherever possible. And certainly wherever possible, we move that decision-making circle as close back to the inside and the person living with dementia as we can, and as they're able to do. And if we have to move it out, then we move it out to the people that are closest to that decision and the impact it's going to have. And that should be informing the work that we do and the decisions that we make as an organisation. Another really important principle within Eden is that the journey of life and the opportunity to learn and grow in life is never ending. And that's a really important thing because, again, in the traditional model of dementia, we stop believing in the medical model of dementia that people can still grow after a diagnosis of dementia as people. And of course, that's just not true. So yes, the cognitive functioning is impaired. Yes, the physical functioning might be deteriorating. But as a person, and what's important to that person, can still continue to grow. And I just think back through my 30 years working with people with dementia, and I've just had some amazing experiences where people living with dementia have taught me so much and have allowed me to grow as a person. And in doing that, they themselves continue to grow as a person. And as long as we're open to that and open to that thinking, then we can all benefit from that. So this idea of the journey of life, the growth and development of us as a human being, regardless of physical condition, regardless of cognitive condition, I think is a really important one that sits within the Eden principles as well. So that's the Eden alternative. And as I said, we've been implementing this for about 15 years now. And I think if you get the opportunity to visit any of the households, you'll see it in practice. And you'll see on a day-to-day basis how these Eden principles come to life in the human habitats that we've created and that are just full of life, joy, laughter, and people just enjoying each other's company, which is the best we can hope for, really. The other model that we've adopted in more recent times is a really interesting model that, again, it's come out of the Eden Alternative Group, but with some others as well. And it's what's been called the domains of wellbeing. And the domains of wellbeing are looking at the individual human needs of a person and how we can start to evolve our own services and our own practice to help somebody with dementia to fulfill those needs to the best of their ability and to the best of their choice of what they want to do. And these domains, there are 7 domains, and they cover a number of different areas about what it means to be a human being. And so if you think about the domains within your own life, because these are not just about dementia, they're not about dementia care, they're not about people with dementia, they're about people. And if you have a look at the 7 domains and then really think about, in my life, how important is each of these domains? How would I feel and respond if one of these domains was really diminished? What would I do if that was really diminished? What would I want people to do to help me refill my glass in that domain? And we talk about the glasses in the sense of, is your glass full, is it half full, or is your glass empty in each domain? Because then we can start to think about, okay, if we take one of the domains that might be meaning, for example. And so meaning's really important to all of us, doesn't matter if you have dementia or not. And the things that we do in our lives, we find things to do that have a sense of meaning and purpose to us. Okay, that might be about our identity, our role, who we are. It might be about our jobs. It might be about our social lives. It could be about the other charities that we support or the causes that we support, whatever it might be. But we find ways to have meaning and purpose in our lives. And that's an intrinsic part of who we are. And when you have dementia, that might get taken away. So those opportunities to do something that's meaningful might get taken away. So if we go back to what I was saying about our day centres in the old days, a lot of the activities that took place had no meaning to the individuals. Or if they did, it might be 3 of the individuals in a group of 12 had some sense of meaning by the activity, but the other 9 were just there. And so What we try to do now is look at each individual and find out what is it that has meaning and purpose to that person. And it might be something that's always been there in their lives, or it might be something that's developing now. Meaning changes for us as we get older, as we change, as things become more important or less important in our lives. So each of these 7 domains form a critical whole picture of us and the spirit of a person. And once these start to get diminished, then we see people slip out of this state of well-being into a state of ill-being.